Alan and Vivian, Charlie 1, were patrolling the county's southern half, especially the county roads. As they drove, both were watching the surrounding scene. Vivian smiled to herself, but Alan saw that and asked, "Why the little smile, sweetheart?" She answered, "I saw Susan yesterday." He asked, "And?" Again she smiled, "You're going to be a daddy, I'm pregnant." He almost went off the road. "Pregnant? You're not kidding, are you?" She leaned over and kissed his cheek. "No kidding. I'm about 6 weeks along. I was waking in the morning with the dry heaves, so I went to see Susan, and she gave me the test, and I'm going to be a mother." He remarked, "You sound happy about it." She sighed, "I am." Patrolling County Road 3, something about the weeds in the bar ditch alerted them that something was different. Alan pulled the patrol car off to the side of the road, and they both got out to check the bar ditch. In the bar ditch, they found the dead body of a young woman, nude. Alan immediately called dispatch and reported, "Dispatch, Unit Charlie 1, 1043, investigating murder, request Unit Charlie 7, Unit MV01, coroner. County Road 3, milepost 21. The dispatcher replied, 10-4. Charlie 1 taped off the area and began photographing the crime scene. The body had obviously been dumped there. Nothing besides the body could be found, no tracks, not even the litter one might typically find on a county road. They did not touch the body except to determine the extremities' relative temperature. Unit MV01, Charlie 7, and coroner arrived. Vivian changed partners with Amber so that the CSI team could begin their investigation. Ty and Vivian went and established the detour, then continued Charlie 7's assigned patrol area. Susan and Sheriff Murdoch examined the body. They found that the body, except for being dead, was a healthy, well-groomed young woman, about 30 years old. She had been dead for about 24 hours. Obviously murdered elsewhere and transported to the dump spot. This was a county gravel road, therefore, no tire marks were found. Alan and Amber photographed the area, examined everything they could find, and then reported to the sheriff that they were at a dead end. The wagon arrived, and they lifted the body to a gurney to depart when Alan saw something that the body had hidden. What Alan found was a Zippo lighter with a Marine decal on one side and an inscription on the other side, Gunnery Sergeant Mike Vito, 1st Marine Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division. Alan looked at the sheriff and then Amber and grew very sad. "Sheriff, I gave this lighter to Mike when we were on our way out of Nam." Sheriff Murdoch replied, "Alan, do you want out of this investigation?" To which Alan replied, "No. I need to find out what this is all about." Then Alan took a close-up photograph of the dead woman's face. Amber checked out the body for any identifying tattoos or other marks. A small globe and anchor was found on her left shoulder. And a name under it, Mike Vito. Alan photographed these tattoos also. The day went on, and Alan and Amber went to their office and began finding out who the victim was. Alan called the Marine Corps headquarters to speak to the Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. Alan spoke to the Sergeant Major, Sergeant Major David Summers. "Sergeant Major, this is Captain Alan Smith of the Mountain View County Sheriff's Department. I am seeking information on a buddy of mine from Vietnam regarding a murder investigation I am involved in." The Sergeant Major replied, "Well, Captain, how can I help you? I want to know whether you can help me find Gunnery Sergeant Mike Vito, formerly of the 1st Marine Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and 1st Marine Division, stationed in Vietnam in 1967. The Sergeant Major asked, "Captain, first, who are you to Gunnery Sergeant Mike Vito?" Alan replied, I was Gunnery Sergeant Alan A. Smith. Gunny Vito and I were platoon sergeants in the same company at the same time. At the murder scene of a young woman, we found a Zippo lighter I gave to Mike the day we left Vietnam. The dead woman had a tattoo on her left shoulder, a globe and anchor and the name Mike Vito." The Sergeant Major asked, "Did you say Gunnery Sergeant Alan A. Smith?" Alan answered, "Yes, I'm Alan A. Smith." The quiet reply was, "Gunnery Sergeant Alan Arthur Smith, Medal of Honor recipient?" Alan replied, "Yes." The Sergeant Major replied, "Give me your phone number. I'll find this guy and call you as soon as I can." Alan gave the Sergeant Major his office phone number, home phone, and the Sheriff's office phone number. He thanked the Sergeant Major and ended his call. Alan turned to Amber and told her what had been said. Then he said, "I guess we need to wait to see what the Marine Corps will tell us." Alan answers the office phone 3 days later. CSI Lab, Captain Smith. On the other end, Gunny, Sergeant Major David Summers. "I know where Mike Vito's retirement is going. The First Commerce Bank of Birmingham, Alabama. I could not get Gunny Vito's address from them. Perhaps you can through law enforcement channels." Alan replied, "Thank you, Sergeant Major. I'll call the Birmingham Police or the FBI. Thanks again." Alan called 411 and asked for the phone number of the police department in Birmingham. When Alan called, of course, his call was bounced around until he was connected to a Lieutenant Wiley. "Homicide, Lieutenant Wiley, how can I help you?" Alan replied, "Lieutenant, this is Captain Alan Smith of the Mountain View County Sheriff's Department. I'm investigating the murder of a young woman, and I need to find a man named Mike Vito. Mike's Marine retirement is being sent to the First Commerce Bank there in Birmingham. Would you be able to help?" Lieutenant Wiley replied, "Captain, you wouldn't happen to be Gunnery Sergeant Alan A. Smith, of A Company, 1st Marine Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, would you? Medal of Honor recipient?" Alan answered, "Yes, I am." Lieutenant Wiley laughed. "Gunny, I'm 1st Sergeant John Wiley. Remember me?" Alan laughed too. "John, of course, A Company. We all sat at the same table every meal." John Wiley replied, "Murder? Mike Vito is living here in Birmingham?" Alan replied, "The Corps said that his retirement is going to your First Commerce Bank, but because of privacy issues these days, the bank could not divulge Mike's contact info." Lieutenant Wiley said, "Well, I'll make it a point to find out where Mike lives, and if I can visit him, I'll get a court order if I have to." Alan replied, "Thanks, Top." He gave the lieutenant his phone numbers and hung up. Alan turned to Amber, "Got an old Marine buddy to try and find Mike Vito." It was time to go home, and Amber sighed, "I sure want to get home to Paul and the kids." Alan replied, "I can't wait to have Vi in my arms." This has been an exhausting day. When Alan walked into his house, Vivian grabbed him, kissed him, and bubbled her joy at seeing him. "Dinner's ready, sweetheart." "Lasagna," Alan said. "Honey, I need some downtime, just holding you." "Half an hour, okay?" She put her head on his chest. "Okay." 2 weeks later, the phone rang, and Amber answered, "CSI Lab, Sergeant Clark." The reply was, "Sergeant, this is John Wiley, Birmingham Police. May I speak to Captain Smith?" Amber replied, "Alan's not here, but I'm his partner. Can you talk to me?" Lieutenant Wiley replied, "Well, yeah. I've discovered something very dark." Amber interrupted, "May I record this conversation?" The lieutenant replied, "Okay. Mike Vito is dead. Individuals are collecting his retirement. That's illegal. I've had to call in the FBI. Things are getting very hot here in Birmingham. But Mike was married, and his wife is dead too. But Mike had a daughter, Lisa Vito, who has disappeared." Amber asked, "Can you get a photo of her and send it to us?" The lieutenant replied, "I've got photos of her. Give me your fax number, and I'll send it." Amber gave him the sheriff's fax number and hung up. A little later, Alan returned to the CSI lab, and Amber played the recording for him. Alan replied, "We'd better play this for the sheriff. You know what he thinks of the FBI?" After hearing the recording, the sheriff shrugged, "I guess we'll just have to cooperate with them if it comes to that." When the photograph of Lisa Vito arrived, Alan and Amber found that their Jane Doe was indeed Lisa Vito. Alan remarked, "Mike must have been proud, she was beautiful," Amber agreed. Later that week, as Alan and Vivian were patrolling Mountain View, the radio sounded, "Unit MV03 and Unit MV04 report to the CSI lab." Vi replied, 10-4. When they arrived at the CSI lab, Alan, Amber, Vivian, and Ty were greeted by two individuals who introduced themselves as FBI agents, Agent Donald Camp and Agent Florence Kildare. Agent Camp said, "Thank you for coming so quickly. Sheriff Murdoch referred us to you, but I thought we would meet with only two of you." Alan replied, "I'm Captain Alan Smith, and this is Sergeant Amber Clark. We are your points of contact. This young lady is Corporal Vivian Smith, my wife and partner." This is Sergeant Ty Soledad, Amber's partner. We have to exchange partners when our duties include our CSI effort. Sergeant Clark and I are our area's CSI unit. Then Alan smiled at Vivian. Okay, Ty, Vi, off you go. See you at home, sweetheart. Vivian smiled and waved as she and Ty left the lab. Agent Camp looked at Alan and lifted an eyebrow. How on earth did you get such a young and beautiful girl to be your wife? She must be only 22 or 3, and you have got to be near 50. Alan grinned. Yeah, ain't it great? Before she died, it was all set up by my deceased wife, Jane. Well, enough of that. What can we do for you? Agent Kildare said. That's a story I would love to hear. We'll be here a few days. Would you share your story with us at lunch or dinner sometime? Alan replied. That would be great, but I would have to talk to Vi first. After all, she's a major part of the story. The two agents responded. Of course. No hurry. Agent Camp began. There is a major fraud case that has developed from your murder investigation. Unfortunately, this may include the murder of some Vietnam veterans or retired military members. Agent Kildare added, the Birmingham police are investigating the deaths of veterans and other retired military members over the past 10 years, looking into what is happening to their retirement and disability checks. Alan thought, I guess we can start there now that we know our Jane Doe is Lisa Vito. Before any other topics could be discussed, the radio sounded, Charlie 1, this is Charlie 7. Over, Amber answered, Charlie 7, this is Charlie 1, go ahead. Radio, Charlie 1, we found a bunch of clothing strewn along the bar ditch on County Road 86. Panties, bra, shoes, hose, purse, blouse, capri pants, looks about right for Lisa Vito. Amber replied, Charlie 7, bring it all to the CSI lab. Charlie 7 replied, 10-4. Waiting for Charlie 7, the FBI agents proposed that they and all 4 sheriff's deputies dine together. Amber replied, of course. At the truck stop, Charlie 7 arrived, delivered the clothing, and all 6 officers drove to the truck stop to be shown to a table and their orders were taken. Alan turned to Vivian, honey, the agents have asked me to tell them how I, an old guy, got such a young, beautiful, girl to be my wife. I said that you would have to be okay with it. What do you think? Vi smiled at her husband and said, may I tell them? Alan replied, what say we both tell them? I'll start with my quitting school. Okay? Alan told them all the story up to the point where Jane became his partner. Vivian then continued the story from her perspective. Her part of the story included Jane's parting words to Vivian and Alan. Jane had stopped and wheezed, the cancer had sapped her strength, but she pressed on. Would you all please leave Alan and Vivian with me for a little while? The sheriff ushered everyone from the room and closed the door. Jane said, Vivian, remember I said for you to remember that Alan was my man? Vi replied, yeah. I remember. Jane smiled, I'm leaving. I want you to take care of my man. Alan, Vivian is very young, you must care for her as you have for the last 2 years, and maybe more. Alan and Vivian continued the story together. Vivian told about the morning after Jane's funeral, Vivian singing I Got You, Babe and fixing Alan's breakfast. Alan seeing her back, shocked and shouting, Jane. The invitation Alan gave Vivian to stay, Vivian's father asking about Alan remaining honorable, and his response. And, as they say, the rest is history. Everyone was enchanted by the story and had been engrossed in what Alan and Vivian had been saying. At the end of the meal, Vivian asked the 2 agents whether they had taken rooms or not. They responded that they had not. Vi looked at Alan and asked if they could stay with them. Alan thought a moment and replied that Roger and Elizabeth would be with their mother for the week, so, okay.